Whatever. I don't really care where you look. You don't. I mean, that's our show intro, everyone. Welcome to the MMA Vivisection.
Just not in your eyes, right, Zane?
Oh, no, God. That's what they're there for.
Okay, all right. Well.
These baby blues are free, babe.
All right. Let's get rolling then.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone, to the MMA Vivisection for UFC Sydney. Werdum versus Tybura, otherwise known as Boomerang Apocalypse.
Yeah.
Or Colby Covington, I'm filing charges.
They messed up the order of some of the plot events in Road Warrior. The boomerang stuff's supposed to happen after the apocalyptic collapse, but they're in Australia. Colby Covington got hit with a boomerang. That's really enough for me at this point.
Yeah, he's pulling an Angela Magana, and
I mean, I've been enjoying the show to some extent, but that's part of enjoying the show, is that I also get to have the schadenfreude of watching Colby Covington get a boomerang thrown at him.
Oh, God.
Sometimes these things happen in MMA.
Yeah, sometimes they do. A lot. That's really kind of, unfortunately, tells you everything you need to know about this card, too. Which is, frankly, that I would much rather talk about Fabricio Werdum throwing a boomerang at Colby Covington than most of the fights on this card.
Most of them, yeah. The phrase I used on Heavy Hands was that much of this card borders on interesting. There's a lot of it that it comes just this close to being like, I care about this.
Nah, I mean, this is one of those cards where I'm like, it's full of some weird dudes, and I'm actually interested in Werdum versus Tybura. So I'm just kind of hoping that we get a bunch of weird dude fights, because there are a lot of people on this card where I'm just like...
Yeah, there's plenty of that. There's a couple highlights. I want to definitely make note of them as we go through.
Okay, you can make note of some highlights.
Those ones that I at least expect to be very action-packed fights.
I will remain skeptical throughout.
After my my very earnest recommendation to pick against Sword Stage Northcutt last week, you'll never take me at face value again.
Fucking hell! I can't. I had that. I could see it in my head.
You had it.
That's okay. I could also see that. I thought that Nina Ansaroff would beat Angela Hill, and I didn't trust myself to pick that either.
It was a good fight, too.
It was a good fight. All right. So let's start off then with a heavyweight bout. Rashad Coulter, Tuivasa.
Well, lots of stuff to go on for both guys for this fight. That's going to be the case for a couple of these early card fights. Tuivasa is a protege of Mark Hunt. He is a big dude. He's, even without the little extra spare tire he's got going on, he's got a pretty good frame for the heavyweight division, I think. 6'2" and broad, big legs.
Really young.
Yeah, he's 24 years old and doesn't have a ton of experience under his belt. I think there's clearly a lot of potential in him. For a guy his size, he's very light in his feet. He seems very sprightly. Whenever he has to react to something just kind of off the cuff, he tends to do it pretty well. He can, on a sudden messy break, he can change stance and move forward and follow up with 3 quick strikes. He likes to lunge.
Hey, at least it happened early this time. Connor Rebush will be right back with more information on Tuivasa, and there he is. Hey, welcome back.
Getting it out of the way early this time.
That's what I just said.
He likes to he likes to lunge across space and kind of expose himself, but I think against the vast majority of like lower tier heavyweights, just the athleticism to do that works. Most people are not going to counter you all that well and don't fight that well moving backwards and don't move backwards all that quickly in this division. He's going to probably have one of the tougher tests of his career in Rashad Coulter, and it's not because Rashad Coulter is a phenomenal fighter, but he is tough as absolute nails. He's got power in his hands. He's got a stocky frame that may make it a little more difficult for Tuivasa to find his strikes with his hands. But I do expect Tuivasa to get Coulter out of there eventually, and I think it's going to come from the clinch. I think we're going to have a lot of messy clinch tie-ups between these guys. And when we do, I think then Tuivasa's height and he's actually pretty good in the clinch too. He throws some good knees, got some good short strikes, so I think that's going to be where his advantages lie. But there's not enough to go on for me to like really have good feelings about Tuivasa in this matchup. Whereas Coulter, like, I didn't see much beyond him just being insanely hard in his last fight, that he could just take a lot of punishment and keep swinging in return, you know?
Yeah, well, hard dude to take punishment, right? That's your MO, right?
Hard as nails, all right? Not hard as whatever you're thinking. All right.
Whatever I'm thinking of. Like there are too many options to consider.
I can't imagine, honestly. My innocent mind can't even conceive of what you're thinking of.
All right. Anyway, I'm actually gonna pick Rashad Coulter here. I just think that it's a conditioning fight, frankly, and Tuivasa looks too out of shape to fight 15 minutes of heavyweight. Maybe he stops Coulter really quickly, but like what even, you know, that James McSweeney fight didn't end because he wrecked James McSweeney's world, and McSweeney's not the toughest dude by any measure.
No.
Like, I just, so if he couldn't get James McSweeney out there, and he's got a tough guy in front of him in Coulter, with the way he looks, like he looked in that 5 minutes, it's the longest fight of his career. He looked dead. I mean, there was a point where he went for a takedown, and he just like sprawled out flat on the floor trying to grab McSweeney's ankle, and it was just like, what is, you know, like I can't.
You know, I was thinking of how exhausted Coulter got in his fight with Chase Sherman, but that fight was also bananas.
Yeah, that fight, like Sherman was putting up pace on him.
Yeah, they were both exhausted, and they both should have been.
And Coulter, to his credit, like he may only throw like a jab hook, but he does at least throw a jab, you know?
Yeah, and another thing with Tuivasa is that he definitely looks like a very raw, inexperienced fighter in the kind of decisions he makes.
Yeah.
Like he will go for like a suplex that he doesn't really know how to do just because it seems like a good idea at the time. Like big wastes of energy that with very low reward.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pick Coulter on conditioning. I think Tuivasa could end up being a good heavyweight, but the way what he's fought to date doesn't seem like it is meaningful in any way.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with Tuivasa for his size and his striking variety, but you almost convinced me there. I think the pace that Coulter can probably maintain is probably something Tuivasa's not had to deal with.
I just trust Coulter to fight for 2 rounds. Like that's really all there is to it, you know? Yeah. It's not like I think Coulter is some amazingly conditioned athlete or anything like that. But
it's just that we've seen that Tuivasa is not.
Yeah. Tuivasa is a slight
favorite after a knee injury too for Tuivasa. He actually got signed in October of 2016.
Yeah.
So
Tuivasa opened at -190, adjusted up to -172, and has stayed pretty stable there, currently at -173. Coulter opened at +150, adjusted down to +145, currently at +143. The heavyweight fight.
If one of us was just a little bit wider, though, a little closer to 200 for Coulter, it might make that a very tempting bet.
Yeah, I mean, it's a low-level heavyweight fight between 2 guys who don't look like they have a lot of cardio and do not have a lot of tools at their disposal.
Low-level fights where the value is, though, Zane. It's the fights that nobody else cares to bet on. That's where you find the value.
That's true. That's true. But, well, I don't know if that's true. I don't bet. Whatever. You can say it. I don't know. I'm just going to agree with you.
I don't know that it's true either, but it sure sounds right.
Yeah, it sure sounds right. All right, that brings us to a flyweight bout. Janelle Lausa, Eric Shelton. I really like this fight a lot, and I expect it'll be pretty competitive just because to date, Shelton is not a deep fighter. He has not, and it's getting a little concerning for me because he's been fighting long enough that I expect more technical depth than I see out of him. Like, he's a very well-rounded fighter at this point. He can wrestle, he can grapple, he can strike, but none of those things seem to come with, like, a amazing amount of, like, a really pinpoint technical game anywhere. And it means that, against guys like Pantoja and Brooks, who are even potentially more one-note than him, he has lost both those fights by close decision. Lausa is also very one-note, and I think in this case, though, it's a note that Shelton's well-rounded game can exploit, because Lausa really only relies on a power boxing game. If it were a high-volume power boxing game, I might pick him to beat Eric Shelton, to just outwork him and out-hustle him. But it's a low-power boxing game built without a jab. And
he is flyweight's Jimmy Manuwa.
Yeah. Like, he is just out there, he'll throw a lot of left hooks, and he'll throw a lot of long right hands, and leans heavy on his front leg to do it. And they're good strikes. He mixes to the body well. He goes to the head well. They're good. There's good technique on him. He moves well. So that's why I think he'll keep the fight competitive, because even against Magomed Babulatov, he kept that fight reasonably, mildly competitive.
Mm-hmm.
But Shelton's ability to actually change things up and press a wrestling game, do some ground and pound, work behind a jab, be lighter on his feet, show a little more flyweight footwork and speed, I think will probably get him the win here. But it's another good testing point for Shelton to see, can you be more than just a guy who looks like a good prospect? Because so far that's what he is. He looks like, it's like, oh man, if you actually put some technical depth to any of these well-rounded skill sets that you have, you could be a really good fighter. But at the moment, you're just getting a little bit outworked by everyone.
I still give him a lot of credit for those performances against Brooks and Pantoja, which
sure, no, they're good performances, but
he's been fighting for, you say he's been fighting for a while, but 2013 is when he made his pro debut. He's still in the development stage.
He's still developing. I'm not closing a book on him. It's just starting to get more to the point where it's like, I do want to see a jump.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I agree. I think Lausa is the right test for that. I also agree that this is a good fight. It's one of the more interesting matchups on the card, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And another illustration of how difficult it is to become a ranked contender in the flyweight division, because as people know, I maintain that there is actually a lot of great talent in this division. But, if you're a young, hot prospect, Eric Shelton would be a golden child if he were at light heavyweight. They would give him such careful matchmaking. They just can't do it at flyweight. The easiest fight on the roster for him probably is Janelle Lausa.
Yeah.
There's just not enough guys.
And Lausa is, you cannot really compete at flyweight at all if you're not a superb athlete. Guys that are just kind of mediocre athletes get shunted out of that division in a hurry. So even a dude like Lausa he's a good athlete.
That's my point. I'm not trying to disparage Lausa. My point is that Janelle Lausa is one of the worst flyweights on the UFC roster, and he's a very good flyweight.
Yeah.
He's quite good. So yeah, I agree. I think Lausa is going to have a good first round against Shelton. I think he can really punk people with those big power shots if they let him. And Shelton has shown a tendency of he likes to wait on his opponents. He likes to see what they're going to do. Not even just exchange by exchange, because he likes to counter, but also over the course of the fight, I think he likes to get a read on his opponents first. I think we've seen in many of his fights that he doesn't have a great first round. After that, though, he's got the speed, he's got the wrestling, he's got nice crisp punches that he can throw just to keep Lausa busy and to force him to swing at air. More than anything, though, he's got conditioning, and I think that is a problem for Lausa, not because he's not in phenomenal shape, but because he literally only throws full power shots. And even though he doesn't throw that many of them, he really throws them. So his output tends to dwindle as the fight goes on, whereas Shelton usually just gets stronger with the later rounds.
I also wouldn't be surprised if Shelton just came out and put a power double on him and tried to overwhelm him with some ground and pound, and not probably get him out of there, but could overwhelm him early and just sort of make that the course of the fight.
Yeah. Maybe try to drag him to the ground when he gets up, hold him in the clinch. Shelton's got a very good clinch game.
Yep.
Yeah, and that might, make Lausa slow down more quickly. But either way, Lausa is going to be there to pose a real threat. For at least half of this fight, he's going to be seriously dangerous. So
yeah,
I'm going with Shelton by decision, but it should be a good one.
Shelton is a reasonably big favorite. Opened at -405, adjusted up to -358, now at -365. And Lausa opening at +285, adjusted up and down really to +288, and now at 285.
It's a little wide, right?
You know, I think it's just like I just don't think Lausa's game is deep enough to win this fight. Like he could catch him with a KO, but Shelton seems to have a pretty great chin. So
Yeah.
I think it's okay just for like the work rate and the style matchup.
Yeah, I was thinking of how dangerous Lausa's striking is, but he doesn't have a ton of knockouts.
He doesn't throw
tough.
enough. He does, that's just it. Like he doesn't even when he hurts people, he doesn't follow up well enough.
Yeah, output alone may be the reason for those odds.
All right. That brings us to a women's strawweight bout. Alex Chambers, Nadia Kassem.
Nadia Kassem is there's so much to say about this young fighter who's just been signed. We were
I'm almost a little mad that you get to go first on this one because I am
please jump in whenever you want. We were griping before we began today's show about the sort of fight footage that is out there for Nadia Kassem. I want to say the sort of fight footage, the sort of fights she's had. Which seriously, they don't border on. They are right in the pocket of the kind of shit that Explode FC used to pull.
Yeah, she is the highest currently. And I realize her career is young, so this is not. There's nothing to say that you can't be a can crusher and become a good fighter. It happens. There are plenty of fighters who have done this. But Nadia Kassem at the moment is a grade A elite can crusher. She is only crushing the canniest of cans.
And so it is virtually impossible. Not like you can look at her and you can say, yes, some of this technique looks pretty good, but it is literally most of the time technique done in a vacuum.
Yeah, she is 0-0 for all intents and purposes.
Yes, it is essentially like watching her hit pads.
Yep.
Because she's honestly being put in there to fight women for titles that have never fought before and have, by the looks of it, never even felt what it's like to be hit in the face. Like
her fight against Belinda Sedgwick, she hit her with a spinning back fist about 2 seconds into the fight. And it was a good one. It was a nice spinning back fist. It wasn't bad. But the woman just looked completely like she had never been hit before.
I can hit a telephone pole with a spinning back fist. That's the thing. Like,
yeah,
I could probably make it look pretty good. It just doesn't say anything if the person is offering zero resistance. They're a grappling dummy. So I'm going with Alex Chambers. I'm going with Alex Chambers because she's tested and she has experience. And Nadia Kassem's been beating women up on the feet who don't know how to strike. I would like to see how she does on the ground with someone who really does know how to grapple. So I'm going with Alex Chambers by submission.
Yeah, Chambers actually, the biggest problem for Chambers, and this is going to be the X factor here, is that she is not strong enough. And she was not even strong enough for her fight against Kylan Curran, which she won by a late, like, come from behind armbar. But that is a big problem for her it's going to be a huge problem in every bout. So it could just be that Nadia Kassem overwhelms her with physicality and hurts her and busts her up, and that will just be the end of it. But she's a very crafty grappler off her back, very aggressive grappler off her back with good submissions. And in her Paige Van Zandt fight, she showed a lot more faith in her striking, in her hands. She still jumps into the clinch because she's got that long karate background, so she has not figured out how to like do the Machida thing where you leap in and push off and create space again. She just leaps in and gets caught in the clinch and beat up. But her striking is looking sharper there, so I got to pick Chambers as well. But physicality will always be an issue for her. Kassem just has not. She's 0-0. She hasn't fought before. The fights she's had are meaningless.
Although her nickname, which is apparently 187, which is a little dark, feels appropriate for the kind of fights that she has had so far.
It's true. Nothing like beating up people who look like drug addicts to suggest that you may be actually just a hitman or hit woman, as it were.
187 on a drug addicted mom.
God.
That's Nadia Kassem's new theme.
Okay, moving right along. Odds.
I get a little credit for a big pun shout out, don't I? Come on now.
Okay, odds. Kassem is a favorite at the moment, opening at -165, now at -169, presumably because people have never seen her fight before and just looking at her record and being like, wow, she's got KOs.
Yeah. I
mean, I could have those KOs too if I wanted to fight.
Honestly, either of us could. And again, we are not bragging at all. This is Nadia Kassem has beaten up people who don't know how to fight.
Yeah. And Alex Chambers is opened at +125 and has risen slowly up to +140. So the odds are actually getting a little longer on her, which, I mean, maybe Nadia Kassem, like I say, this could be a physicality thing. Chambers has that problem, but she's actually fought real people before, so.
Even if it is, isn't it more likely, or at least equally likely, that it is a physicality thing that only lasts for 4 minutes?
Yeah,
and then Nadia Kassem gets tired, and Alex Chambers has been there before. So
4 minutes would be a stretch. She's never had a fight longer than 1.5 minutes.
Right. They've all been 8 seconds.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it's Alex Chambers should be favored.
That brings us to a lightweight bout: Damien Brown, Frank Camacho, and I actually like this fight a lot.
It's one of my other highlights of the card for sure. I love this matchup.
This should be a fun one, and it's going to be kind of an odd one. Because Frank Camacho probably should win this fight. He's the more technical boxer. He's the better defensive boxer. He looks like I think he's the better athlete. He's faster. But he also has this habit of getting slept in the opening minutes of round 1.
He's a goddamn maniac.
Because he's a goddamn maniac and he fights like a goddamn maniac.
He lives and dies by the sword every single time.
And Brown, for being incredibly foot slow and generally not very athletic, does have really shockingly good hand speed and power. Mm-hmm. He's a surprisingly accurate puncher who throws with speed and hits hard. So there's a very real chance that Damien Brown will come out of the gate and sleep Frank Camacho with a nice, a surprising winging string of strikes. In his fight against Vink Pichel, Brown showed some technical improvement, the ability to, he sticks his chin out and he throws both hands at once on his flurries, but he was actually taking his head offline and ducking out and finding an angle on the end of those flurries. So, when Pichel hadn't got the timing down and wasn't countering well, then Brown was throwing 2 or 3 strikes and then ducking out at an angle and actually looked pretty good. He eventually got knocked out, which is why I'm still picking Camacho here. But Brown has the ability to surprise people. He is definitely a better fighter than it looks like he would be if you just watch old tape of him.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing here too will be that Camacho, as we talked about this with going into his Li Jinglong fight, and it ended up being the case, his style tends to break down as fights go on. He starts out really technical, really composed, really aggressive. Then as he starts to get hit a little, as he starts to get a little tired, it breaks down just into more kind of winging hooks.
He just can't resist.
But he also gets tougher as fights go on. If you haven't knocked him out early, you're probably not going to knock him out because, he gets into a better rhythm. He gets a little more... he gets a little more defensively sound, a little less surprised, a little more in the fight.
And yes, unless you're the leech, where you only get more dangerous.
Yeah.
With those
But even the leech didn't sleep him. It was just a decision.
That's true. I forgot he didn't knock him out because he came very close on a few occasions in that later rounds of that fight.
Yeah. So I think that Camacho.
I had that as a knockout in my head.
No, I'm taking Camacho here because he's tough. If he can survive early, he's tough, and he's just a tighter boxer, and he's a better athlete, I think. Brown, even in fights where he's not a bad grappler technically, he has the right moves, he hits the right spots, he can do the right things, but he's also just been outworked by better athletes consistently on the mat and outpositioned by better athletes. And he beat John Tuck, which is a testament to his ability to improve and to his ability to rally. But John Tuck's also kind of very beatable by anybody who's willing to just keep working hard and go after him.
Yeah.
So I know Camacho could lose this too. He's not exactly got the most stellar record, but I think he can take this one.
Yeah, I more or less agree across the board there. Damien Brown doesn't have a ton of horsepower, except for he's got some pop in his hands, but he's just not a. People don't really seem to feel clinch engagements with Damien Brown. They don't really seem to feel, scrambling with him on the ground. It doesn't seem to require a lot of effort. And Frank Camacho, at the very least, is a capable scrambler and a solid athlete. This fight gets interesting from the opening bell and then gets more interesting in different ways if Damien Brown makes it out of that first round, even if he makes it out of the first few minutes. Because Brown is, if his chin holds up, a very tough guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be flustered, I don't think, if his consciousness is still there. And he is sharp enough and clever enough as a striker that he can get shots in on Frank Camacho as he slows down a bit and turn this into a sort of war. The problem for Damien Brown is I don't think he can really do much but turn this into a war. And that tends to be what Frank Camacho does really well.
Yeah.
It's like a Justin Gaethje fight. You can't ever have full confidence that Justin Gaethje is going to make it out of this fight okay, but you also know, having seen 10 of them in a row, he's good at this kind of fight. That's what he does. That's Frank Camacho. You can watch fights of his where he is fighting somebody with a 7-3 record that you've never heard of, and it'll be like a war for the ages.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, what a fight. So I think it's going to be fun to watch. I think Brown is going to be able to turn it into that kind of fight, most likely. But I think Frank Camacho, as he usually does, will win that kind of fight.
Yeah, if Brown were a more athletic wrestler, yes, and locked like a better lockdown grappler, I would give him a serious chance of being able to just stifle and overwhelm Camacho, and turn it into his kind of fight. But I don't think that Brown has the speed on the ground to stop Camacho from scrambling.
No, not unless Camacho is completely dead tired. If Damien Brown is still fresh later in this fight, if he conserves his energy and has created a kind of back and forth war at points, Camacho does tend to gas, because as soon as he starts going to war, he starts throwing everything into every single shot. So there are chances there for Damien Brown that
this could easily be a messy split decision,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I think it'll be fun no matter how it plays out.
Yeah, no, definitely. Brown and Camacho both have styles that are built to not at all take advantage of their own skills and durability.
Yeah.
But really make it fun, really make it fun fights. They're never going to be in a bad fight. So. Nope. Camacho is the current favorite, opened at -120, dropped down to -129, is now up to -140. Brown opened at -120 as well, so they opened at dead even, adjusted up to +103, and is now up to +114. That feels about right to me.
Sure.
Heavyweight bout next, Anthony Hamilton, Adam Wieczorek. We have what? Yeah,
rescheduled.
Rescheduled. We've already talked about this fight My feelings have not changed on it since we last talked about it. Oh, and it's your turn to lead, so you should talk about it.
Yeah, I guess they moved this from the UFC Danzig card because Wieczorek supports a rival soccer club in that city. That there was going to be like a riot with soccer hooligans.
There were a bunch of hooligans causing trouble at the venue, and they just decided to pull him off the card.
So he's fighting here instead. Our expectations last time, Hamilton, we have both decided unilaterally we're just never going to trust Anthony Hamilton to win a fight ever again because we rarely get his fights correct. And he lately has just been getting slept by people in seconds. And he has an advantage of size, a pretty dramatic one over Wieczorek, who honestly could probably be a light heavyweight. Topology says his last weigh-in was 227.
Yeah.
He's not a massive heavyweight, but he is also dexterous and quick and just better put together technically than Hamilton has really ever been. So I'm going with Wieczorek.
Yeah, the biggest thing here is that Wieczorek seems to fight really well when he gets tired. Like he gets in these, he puts a pace. He starts fights with a pace that neither he nor his opponent can maintain. And then when he gasses out, he's still the one fighting really hard, and so he wins. That's like really all it is. Like he's not any technical marvel anywhere. He's not good going forward or good going backward or a great wrestler or a great grappler. But when he gets tired, he still goes after people and fights hard and will go, take the fight anywhere. And Hamilton, like that Daniel Spitz loss, that was just kind of like, man, whatever. Okay.
How am I supposed to feel about this, Anthony? I mean,
yeah.
How am I supposed to favor you in any fights going forward after this bizarro shit?
Yeah. So I'll take the guy who I think can press a harder fight and will be throwing harder and will be throwing hard for multiple rounds against a guy who just does not have the durability of a heavyweight.
Yeah, that's a good shout. I recall his fight with
Zumana Cisse.
There was another one. His fight with Philip Toe.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it's Philip Toy.
Yeah.
Who he he just stuck to him as soon as he felt him fading. Like he had him in the rear waist lock, and Toe was trying to flee, and he just stayed with his chest glued to his back and just hit him on the sides of his head as he tried to run away.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that kind of stuff will go far, I think, at heavyweight. Just be a stick-to-it fighter who just takes advantage of when other heavyweights gas. That works.
And absolutely, Anthony Hamilton could beat him because, like I say, he's not good anywhere. It's not like he's a technically good fighter anywhere.
He's okay in clinch.
But Anthony Hamilton, I said the same thing about Daniel Spitz, and Daniel Spitz just ran over Anthony Hamilton.
Yeah.
Wieczorek is the favorite, open at -165, adjusted up and down, back to -149, is now out to -162. Hamilton, he opened at +125, adjusted up and down to +123, is now +134. So, whatever. Anthony Hamilton fight.
Whatever. Yeah, that's the best note to move on, really.
Lightweight bout next, Will Brooks, Nick Lentz. And we've also already talked about this fight.
Yeah.
And, thoughts still haven't changed on it, which is mostly that this is a great matchup for Will Brooks. Because Nick Lentz has become even more prone to gassing as he's gone back up to lightweight late in his career. He seems like he's packed on more muscle. And where he used to be the dude who just took people down and locked on a position and poured on small peppering offense until he gassed out halfway through the third round and got his ass whooped for 2.5 minutes. That's like if you go back, that is every old Nick Lentz fight that he won is him just like in top ride with a single with what the Turk is it
Sure.
that Goldberg always goes on about.
Turk is like a it's not usually something from ride. It's like
No.
a half guard leg elevation that keeps somebody on their back or keeps
Yeah,
them
well,
turning over.
so it's like he's got his leg hooked around somebody's leg while with like an arm around their head and lifting that one leg up so they're posting on one leg.
That sounds like a Turk.
Yeah. And then he just would pepper away with short little punches, and he'd do that for 2 rounds. And then somebody would be like, oh, he doesn't really hurt me, and he seems to be getting tired. Maybe if I just go after Nick Lentz, I can beat him up. And then they'd beat him up for the last half of round 3.
It's just Nick Lentz's tribute to Gleison Tebow.
Yeah. And now he's put on more muscle, and he just throws power hooks over his head that are not hard to pick off, but hit hard, but aren't hard to pick off, and gasses out in a round and a half, and has to hope that he's then the more technical fighter. And against Will Brooks, like, I don't think Nick Lentz he's never been dangerous enough to be the guy that should put Will Brooks away early. And if he's going to go away after a short burst early in the fight, then Will Brooks should absolutely be able to take over.
Yeah, the last bit of rationalizing you can do if you're Will Brooks to defend your psyche is to think at least the 2 guys who beat me in big upsets are both really dangerous finishers.
Yeah.
You know, like at least they're both really dangerous, and that's not Nick Lentz.
Yeah, Will Brooks made a mistake there of I let 2 guys who are really aggressive, dangerous finishers just like I started slow against 2 guys that are aggressive, dangerous finishers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also maybe like I spent a large portion of a fight with Alex Oliveira tying up with him.
Yeah.
Even though he came in like 10 pounds overweight and he's already gargantuan compared to me. So who knows what's going on with Will Brooks, what the future may hold. But I think I may have been a little more favorable towards Nick Lentz the last time we talked about this. I don't remember which side I fell on, but I think I tend to kind of just agree with what you said here. I think the stamina has become the big sticking point for me regarding Nick Lentz. Like, he's not dangerous enough early. The basic meta of the fight. He's not dangerous enough early to do what Charles Oliveira did. And he tends to lose steam halfway through the fight. And Will Brooks, as we know, is a fighter who, like, rounds 3, 4, and 5 are usually his best. Once he's gotten his read and his opponent, he feels confident, he's in his rhythm, then he starts to do really good work. So I expect maybe a tough first round for Will Brooks, but probably more one in which he's just trying to be safe and not getting much done. And then in rounds 2 and 3, I expect him to start taking over both in the tie-ups and with the striking at range.
Yeah. And even if he is aggressive early and does take chances, Lentz has never been accurate enough to knock people out, even though he has some power. Like, he's put on all this muscle, he's developed some power, but he just doesn't have the accuracy to knock people out and follow up when he hurts someone. And he's never been quite, like, he's a good positional lockdown wrestler, but his jiu-jitsu has never been really locked or like tight enough in the cage to be able to turn the positions he gets into submissions.
This is, of course, assuming that Will Brooks is like mentally okay, that he still feels confident, and you know, like it's hard to know where he's really at after such a disappointing downfall from being like longtime defending Bellator champ to bordering on UFC bust.
Especially downfall like right in the middle of the prime of his career.
Right, exactly. So there are some questions there. If he's faltering in that way, like Nick Lentz is capable of putting the kind of early pressure on him that it could cause some problems. But
he's just not a finisher. So even that is just odds on this fight. Will Brooks is too big a favorite considering what's been happening to Will Brooks.
Yeah.
He opened at minus 385 and then fell steadily down to minus 521 and is now at minus 538. And Nick Lentz opened at plus 265 and has risen steadily up to 385 and is now at plus 393. So, I mean, we just spelled out very clearly that we think Will Brooks has this fight, but I still like having watched Will Brooks blow 2 fights for his passivity early in fights. It's hard to then be like, yeah, minus 600 Will Brooks. There it is.
Still gives you a little anxiety to see him as anything more than like a minus 180 favorite.
I know. All right. Brings us to a flyweight bout. Ryan Benoit, Ashkan Mokhtarian.
I guess this is what maybe this is the whole reason they signed Ashkan Mokhtarian, is to just have him fight dudes on Australia cards. Ryan Benoit is this is my go, right?
Yep. I'm waiting.
Ryan Benoit in my book is is just a better version of what Ashkan Mokhtarian wants to do. Like, he's a kickboxer who doesn't grapple or wrestle particularly well, and Ryan Benoit is just better at it. Like, Mokhtarian just doesn't. I don't know. He doesn't seem to offer a lot. I remember in that. What would you want to say? What do you want to say, Zan?
I was gonna say I actually think that all Ashkan Mokhtarian wants to do really anymore is grapple.
That's true. He does like to take people down and then do nothing on top of them as well.
Yeah, he's just not a good grappler. I think the bigger problem is that he's not a good grappler or wrestler, but that's really what he wants to do.
Yeah. I assume he's a kickboxer because he's so clearly not that good on the ground. John Moraga took him to school on the canvas.
Oh, yeah.
He just tied him up in knots on the ground. And while Ryan Benoit won't do that, Ryan Benoit is, I think, a better athlete and is a much more powerful striker with good form, good accuracy. Like, I think Benoit is going to be able to hit Mokhtarian really whenever he wants. And Mokhtarian is probably of all the opponents Benoit has fought who want to take him down, which is most of them, probably the least threatening in that regard.
Benoit's movement alone can. This will be like the Freddie Serrano fight again, except with somebody who doesn't wrestle very well.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
You know,
that was a great fight, wasn't it?
It was a great fight.
It's a truly bizarre fight.
That was the middleweight of flyweight bouts.
Yes, it was the first. That was what I called it, the first middleweight fight in flyweight history.
Yeah.
Didn't Freddie Serrano do nothing but like throw spinning wheel kicks?
Spinning wheel kicks and big slamming takedowns.
That was a great fight. I got to rewatch that.
Yeah.
We got to watch it under the Prestus.
Did we already?
I don't know that we have, but that's a good choice if we haven't.
It's a good bad fight if ever there was one.
We did, like on an early app.
I think we may have on an early one. Yeah, this one seems really easy to me. Mokhtarian is just not good. Like, he's not a good athlete. He's not a good wrestler. He's not a good grappler. He's not a good kickboxer. Yeah. And yeah, that's really all there is to it. So
yeah, like, not to be cruel to the guy, but we asked when he had his first fight, that fight with Moraga was scheduled. We're like, I'm not sure why the UFC signed him, because it's like they bring him in for a local card because he's a local fighter, maybe with some hype around him. We don't know, but we could tell right away, like, he just doesn't have. He's not on the UFC flyweight level.
Yeah, he's a dude who cut through the Australian regional scene, like so many people we have found and talked to and like watched and talked about, as the only dude who wrestles on the Australian regional scene. Like, he would kickbox and he would like have an okay kickboxing match with somebody for a couple minutes and then take them down and get on top of them and be like, you know, I thought we were here to fight, mate. What's this? What's this wrestling?
What they would say in a dejected tone is, hello? I thought we were going to fight. Yeah, he's definitely on the opposite end of the Australians who out-wrestle other Australian spectrum from the next guy we're going to talk about, and Volkanovski. Like, if you want to look at how little a bunch of out-wrestling performances in Australia can tell you, you look to Mokhtarian. And if you want to look at how wrong you can be about that dynamic, you look to Alexander Volkanovski.
Yeah. So I I really just, Mokhtarian not seeing it here. And Benoit has been looking like he still has problems with wrestlers, but even if, his fights with Brandon Moreno, that was a split decision, and he has been able to overcome some of that lately. So I think this should be pretty clear for him. Let's see. Odds on that. Benoit is a pretty reasonable favorite. Opened at -230, adjusted down to -245, has slowly trickled out to -274. Mokhtarian opened at +170 and has slowly climbed up to +221. So odds could probably get longer. I don't really I would not pick Mokhtarian to beat anybody in the current flyweight division at all.
No.
You mentioned Janelle Lausa might be the easiest matchup in flyweight. It's Mokhtarian.
I said Janelle is one of the worst fighters in the UFC flyweight roster, and he is so far above Mokhtarian. Yeah. Janelle Lausa would thrash Ashkan Mokhtarian.
Yeah, I think so. That brings us to a featherweight bout. Alexander Volkanovski versus Shane Young.
This is you, right?
Is it? Me. Yeah, I guess it is. This also seems like a really, really easy fight to pick. Like, nothing against Shane Young, but he seems like a guy who's learning all the MMA ropes. Like, he looks like an all-right kickboxer when he's on his feet, learning the basics, keeping reasonably controlled with them. Throws a decent 1-2, low kick, all that kind of stuff. Nothing that's like, oh my God, electric on the feet. He does some athletic scrambling and grappling, especially against guys who don't know how to grapple. And, thus he doesn't have a lot of knockouts. He tends to, hurt people and then get them in a scramble and choke them. Volkanovski, by any standards, globally, in MMA, is a very good wrestler.
Yes.
He is a very good wrestler and a completely tireless one. And he reminds me a lot of Gregor Gillespie. Like, he hits hard, he's a willing striker, and then he will just get on your hips and stay on you and hit takedowns all fight and beat you up if you can't stop him.
He's way meaner than Gillespie with his ground and pound now.
Yeah.
Volkanovski.
Great ground and pound. Just a really well put together fighter behind a dedicated power wrestling game. And I don't see anything in Shane Young's arsenal that looks like it would stop that. So I got to pick Volkanovski here.
Yeah, I agree. Young has some very good things going for him. He has the look of a good developing fighter. But Volkanovski is essentially he's not a finished product. There's still some honing that can be done. But he's pretty much a finished product. He's got everything he needs to really compete. And honestly, I'm at the point where I'm done seeing these kinds of fights from Alexander Volkanovski. Like, I would have been much more interested if they put him on this card with a solid opponent, like a top 15 opponent, because I think he's ready for that level.
Well, he was supposed to fight Jeremy Kennedy, but even that
still would have been more interesting, because at least that's somebody who is also a tireless wrestler who would engage with him in that kind of fight. So
yeah, I still would have picked Volkanovski pretty easily in that.
Yeah, I would prefer fighters tougher than Jeremy Kennedy, more established than Jeremy Kennedy.
Yeah,
because I think Volkanovski's ready for it, and that's why it makes it pretty easy to pick him here. So Volkanovski probably by like a mid-fight TKO.
Yep. And these odds do feel right. Volkanovski opened at -505 and has dropped steadily down to -650. And Shane Young opened at +335 and has risen steadily up to +457. So, I mean, Shane Young's not a great finisher, and he's fighting somebody that is just way more technical than him. So, that brings us to a middleweight bout. Elias Theodorou, Dan Kelly.
Woo! Hold on.
Yeah, tally yourself off a little.
Just got very excited when I heard those two names mentioned together.
Yeah, you know, I understand if you need to take a little break, change your pants, you know, like towel, shower.
You know what? I'm going to sit in it. I'm going to leave these ones on.
All right.
What a fight. Elias Theodorou, what is his reputation going to be as a UFC middleweight? He is like already becoming, to a lot of people, like people are less excited about his fights than they are about Sam Alvey's fights sometimes. How can that be? Because I guess they know Sam Alvey does knock people out occasionally.
But yes, that Sam Alvey came into the UFC with like 4 straight knockouts, and everybody were like, "Oh my God, Sam Alvey's a knockout machine!" And now they're like, "You know, Sam Alvey might actually be kind of boring."
He might be. I've only seen him fight 9 times in the UFC, and only like 3 of them have been those great knockouts we know he's capable of. Elias Theodorou is not capable of that kind of knockout. He's just doesn't seem to have that kind of power in him. You got to admire Elias Theodorou's game. Like, it is weird. It's probably very difficult to prepare for a lot of fighters. He kind of
how many dudes are you gonna find in the gym who will repeatedly backhand chop you with their left hand?
Right, exactly. He just keeps this really low stance and just does a lot of touching and feinting. He keeps a lot of. It's strange because he manages to keep a lot of pressure on his opponents without really threatening them all that much. He doesn't have a lot to threaten them, but he can like psych people out because he's just busy. And busy with weird strikes that people, once you start waiting on him, then like you don't want to play a guessing game of what's Elias Theodorou going to do next, because it's always going to be something slightly weird.
I think he's got a bit of it's sort of like a really hyperactive version of what Sean Strickland does, in that like Sean Strickland doesn't show you more than a jab, but he's big and he's powerful. And so people are like, oh, there's something coming. I got to be careful of what's behind this jab, which is
empty bluff.
Never anything more than a jab.
At least Sean Strickland can sit somebody down with the right hand.
Yeah.
I don't know that Theodorou can.
Theodorou, he's big and strong. Like, he's a strong, well-built light heavy or middleweight. And so there, like, it creates that same bluff where he's hyperactive and he's this big, powerful looking guy, and people are like, well, I gotta watch out. Like, I don't want to get caught by him.
Yeah. And I'm much more worried about that physicality than I am about the weird volume striking. I don't think that Dan Kelly is going to just wait on Theodorou and just watch him touch away. I think Dan Kelly is going to try to get to business, which makes this a much more interesting matchup than many of Theodorou's other fights have been.
Yep.
Kelly, as we've noted many times, is quite possibly the oldest man on earth, and is he's very stiff when he fights. Nothing looks natural or smooth, but he's actually a very competent striker. Like, his sense of distance is on point. He's got good timing. He's easy to hit, but he's not that easy to hit clean unless you're like way faster than him. And Theodorou is definitely youthful, but he doesn't have that kind of youthfulness to land those kind of really dazzling strikes. So I'm more interested in how Theodorou does it in the tie-ups, because if Kelly can put some kind of pace on Theodorou or compete with him on the feet, then Theodorou really needs to do very well in the tie-ups to keep Kelly from turning this into another Dan Kelly win by the 3rd round. Theodorou is very strong, and he's a very good scrambler. He has never been, for a long period of time, out-grappled by anyone in the UFC. But Dan Kelly is a very sneaky takedown artist and very tricky in the clinch, and he doesn't need to hit his takedowns from the clinch for it to work for his overall strategic goal. Like, it's all just part of stringing things together and keeping the pace on, keeping this nice, steady, chugging tempo to the fight. I think Dan Kelly can win this fight, and I think I'm going to pick him.
I am too. I'm not going to. The thing, like, this is such a weird ass middleweight fight. Like, watching tape on this, and it's just like, only at fucking middleweight can this fight exist. And the thing is that, like, yeah, Elias Theodorou, you know, he is the master of, like, even in his fight with Brad Tavares, but, you know, the master of fights with guys like Cesar Ferreira and Brad Tavares of just filling around with bullshit that an opponent is like, well, did I do enough? Like, what do I do with this? What is the fight I'm supposed to be having here?
Yeah, I wrote about I was writing a thing about Arislandi Lara, and I was talking about how he tends to put his opponents into a fight where they feel like they're competing, but they're never winning.
Yeah.
So they feel like they're in it for 12 rounds, but by the end, they're like, holy shit, I only won 2 of those rounds. But Elias Theodorou does it like Arislandi Lara does it with such subtlety and beauty and craft that like it's very artistic.
Yeah.
And Elias's is like a very weird way of getting to the same goal.
Yeah. And Dan Kelly, the thing that has marked his career is that he is the complete antithesis of that.
Yeah.
He's the dude that if you're out there thinking I can bullshit and I can just do a few fancy things that are going to confuse this guy, that are going to make him respect me, that are going to get me through a round and keep me ahead, Dan Kelly would be like, well, I'll just throw 10 more strikes than you do at you and win the round. That's fine. I can just come out and win the round.
I think that's part of why Dan Kelly can be like an old man with no fight experience and suddenly become such a solid fighter.
Yeah.
He just doesn't give a shit about what other people are trying to do. He's just going to do Dan Kelly until he can't.
Like you go back and you watch that Rashad Evans fight.
Right.
And Rashad, like, it's just like you'll see him like land this big body kick or this big hook and all that. And it's like, wow, that looked powerful. That looked good. And then I was watching the rest of it. I was just like, if I were, it's like, if I had to, and this is totally presumptuous of me, so take it as it is. Like, realize I'm being a complete asshole here. But if you were like watching it with Rashad Evans, I would just be like, okay, he just hit you. What are you doing here? And he hit you again, and he hit you again, and he hit you again. You didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. Oh, there's a nice body kick. Oh, okay, that's good. Dan Kelly comes back. There's a jab on the right hand, and
anything you do to Dan Kelly changes nothing about the way he fights unless you separate him from his senses.
Yeah,
he's awesome for that reason.
And Theodorou just is not a knockout artist in any way, shape, or form. And especially the problem is that he does not ever put enough in his hands if he's not tied up with somebody to knock them out.
He probably does have more pop than we've seen. It's just that he does not even really throw hard punches.
No, and he doesn't try to. Like, the dude who is like, who has this style, and then he'll do like a backhand and chase with a right hand, and fall into the clinch. Like, neither of those punches are made to land with power or accuracy. Even
where does Elias train?
I think he may have.
It's insane that he has never had anything to do with like old Mike Winkeljohn, because the weirdness of his striking is very much like classic Mike Winkeljohn shit.
I think he has split some time at TriStar before, but he's listed on at least on Wiki as Grant's MMA and Tap Out Burlington. Like, I think he trained at some pretty small Canadian gyms.
Is it Grant, like the glove company?
I don't know.
Because they're Canadian, I think. Could be.
I don't know. I cannot tell you.
Good gloves.
The point being, if what you see in a lot of Theodorou fights, what you see in the Brad Tavares fight, and other bouts, is that he throws, anytime he throws punches, it's a way for him to fall into the clinch and then try to if he's not winning striking exchanges, if his opponent isn't confused by him, his offense relies on him getting to the clinch and working for takedowns and working a grappling game. And maybe he can out-wrestle Dan Kelly, but not a lot of people can. Rashad Evans couldn't.
He stalled out against Thiago Santos there and just started losing the fight wholesale once he couldn't make turn the clinch into anything else. Dan Kelly is not going to do it the way Thiago Santos did, but he is similarly, arguably much more difficult to really have your way with in the clinch. Like, that is That's his realm. That's his judo background that
And
he knows very well.
that may be where Theodorou throws his best punches, but it's also where Kelly throws his best punches.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Kelly is a busy offensive boxer in the clinch.
Mm-hmm.
So, I got to pick Dan Kelly. Theodorou may get lucky, like land a knee or some like flying switch kick that knocks Kelly out, because Kelly's not hard to hit. He's going to be coming forward. He's going to be pressing the action. But if Theodorou doesn't knock him out, I'm not picking him to win.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Odds on this fight, Theodorou is the favorite at the moment. Opened at -210, dropped down to -253, adjusted down to -253, and is now -263. So
I'm shocked the odds haven't changed more than that.
Yeah, drifting out a little wider. Dan Kelly opened at +160, adjusted up to +197, and is now up to +212. So
a little bet on Dan Kelly. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, Theodorou is just, even at his best, he's not a safe bet. Like, his wins over Cesar Ferreira and Sam Alvey were razor close decision wins. And he TKO'd Roger Narvaez and Sheldon Westcott, who's a welterweight. And other than that, he's got a decision over Bruno Santos. And, like, he's not a dude who just has a dominating style in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
All right. That brings me to a welterweight bout, Jake Matthews versus Bojan Velickovic. And, I mean, the X factor here is, how does Jake Matthews look at welterweight? Because he's not even he's a thickly built lightweight, but at 5'9", he's not he's no towering figure even in the lightweight division. I'm going to assume that he looks pretty good, and that filling out and putting muscle back on helps him more than anything, honestly.
Yeah, he's always been pretty agile and quick. That could very well be a strong advantage at welterweight that he didn't have at lightweight.
But that size is the X factor, because Bojan Velickovic at 6 foot is a reasonably big welterweight. Like, he's not huge, but he's a big guy in the division. Like, he doesn't get outsized easily by anyone. Even Darren Till was not like worlds bigger than Bojan Velickovic.
Yeah. He's got one of those weird big frames.
Yeah. Otherwise, though, I gotta pick Matthews. Just because Matthews actually has a fight style and game that he follows. Like, Matthews' biggest problem is that he only fights on straight lines. And that has been... well, okay, he has 2 problems. I tell a lie. He only fights on straight lines, and he's not as good a wrestler or grappler as he needs to be an elite grappler in the UFC. So, in these fights, when he's fighting dudes, like even his fight against Andrew Holbrook, who is incredibly, chinny and one-dimensional as this power grappler only, that ends up being a close fight for Matthews, because Matthews is going to be predictably just running straight ahead. Like, he's not a bad boxer. He has some decent snap on his punches. He throws with some decent technique. But he will only be coming straight at somebody with his head on line and in the same speed. So he's not a hard striker to time. And then he's just not... he's a good wrestler and grappler, but he's not an elite one. So dudes like Kevin Lee and Andrew Holbrook, he gets them to the ground, and they turn that fight into something much more difficult than he anticipated because of it.
Yeah.
However, even by that standard... Yep. Even by that standard, Bojan Velickovic is not a good defensive wrestler at all. And he can scramble and he can work with guys on the ground, but he's also just not a very good grappler or wrestler or striker. He's become a slowly better kickboxer, but he's still clunky and he's really slow. That's the big thing. Like, he's just been, I think that's probably why he's not great at anything particularly over time, even with the amount of experience and training at a good camp that he's had for years now, is that, like, he just can't keep up with people. And I think I'm going to bet that he's not going to be able to keep up with a pretty good athlete in Jake Matthews.
Yeah. This is maybe one of the more interesting fights on the card, and maybe because the matchup is kind of difficult to suss out for me. Because, yeah, I'm on board with all that, but I think there is a lot to be said for that X factor of size.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it could be that Matthews will get in on takedowns against Velickovic and either struggle to get them, and Velickovic will just sprawl Matthews out and really put the screws to him. Or it could be that he gets him down and he's too small to hold him down, and Velickovic will be able to just scramble back up repeatedly.
It could even be that Matthews has more trouble than he's ever really had, like darting in and out and getting inside in the first place. That Velickovic is very slow, but he is definitely progressing technically as a striker.
Yep.
And if he can stick Matthews at range, like, he's got some pretty devastating kicks. He's a weird fighter, but he's going to have a 3-inch reach and height advantage here. And he used to compete at middleweight. Like, he's not, as you said, he's not small in frame for the division either. He's kind of lanky and wiry, but, you know, in that weird, like, big lanky guy way. He's got a sort of Python-like look to his arms. And I'm not sure. Jake Matthews, as you said, like, he was not a huge lightweight.
No.
So I can really imagine him just thinking that he can go in here and be confident and explosive and tiring himself out, tying up with Velickovic. I can see him being unexpectedly flustered at range by the length of Velickovic's limbs. But I can also see him looking refreshed and maybe looking really strong. Maybe he's packed on some muscle for welterweight. I'm just gonna take a flyer on Velickovic here, actually. I think the size is going to be a problem for Matthews as the fight goes on. I think he is going to tie up with Velickovic. The thing that you mentioned about him basically always grappling and always being surprised when he doesn't just cut through people's guards and teleport to their backs on the ground. Velickovic can offer some resistance. He's not an amazing technical grappler, but he's strong and he's very persistent. So I'm going to go with Velickovic. I think he will wear Matthews out and then put him in some bad positions and maybe win a close decision by the end.
Yeah, it could happen. I just, like, you know, I don't know that Bojan Velickovic has ever actually won a round in the UFC.
Yeah.
Even in his wins, like that Alessio Di Chirico one was really.
Jake Matthews did look. That's the thing too. Like, what's he been doing lately? Jake Matthews looked really sharp in that fight with Johnny Case. Like, he was showing whole new levels of striking. Like, if I had a lot of faith in Jake Matthews as a fighter, I would say he could do something like that to Velickovic. Just kind of keep a higher pace, dart in and out, make him work, and take advantage of his slow feet. But he didn't really do that against Andrew Holbrook. It seems like exactly what you should do against Andrew Holbrook. And he didn't do it. So I don't know. I don't have a ton of faith in Jake Matthews.
I don't have that kind of faith in him either. I just don't. I mean, like, Holbrook had an answer for what Matthews does well or wanted to do well.
Yeah.
And I don't trust Velickovic to have that answer, frankly. Like, everybody who's wanted to take him down has taken him down.
Yeah. Have faith in Serbian Steel, Zane. You'll see.
All right. Somebody tried to very dedicatedly tell me that Velickovic had a very good chance of beating Darren Till, and I was like,
damn, he did come closer than he should have, though, didn't he?
He did come closer than he should have. So, That seems more of a testament to Darren Till's weird ass way of fighting, though.
Yeah, no, Darren Till is definitely in that Arislandi Lara category of I'm letting the fight be close because I'm pretty sure I just nicked each round.
Yeah. That brings let's see, odds on that fight. Jake Matthews is the slight favorite, opened at -175, has climbed steadily up to now -142. Velickovic opening at +135 and falling steadily to +117. So those odds falling closer to dead even, and I'm fine with that. There's a lot of unknowns surrounding Matthews. He's the better athlete. He's got more technical areas to his game, but he's going to be the smaller man moving up in weight against a former middleweight.
I would love to see a really quick, agile welterweight Jake Matthews, though. Like, that would be amazing.
Welterweight bout next, Tim Means, Belal Muhammad.
Hard not to enjoy this matchup.
Mm-hmm.
This is a solid pairing. This is my go.
Yeah.
I'm on board here. Here's the interesting dynamic in this fight. Both of these guys can compete with each other in some ways in the striking, but to me, the big question is, will Belal Muhammad strike with Tim Means? A lot. I mean, is he? Because if I'm Belal Muhammad, I'm thinking I'm gonna leg kick this dude and jab him as little as I can at range, and I'm gonna take him off his feet, because everybody knows the one major vulnerability with Tim Means, two major vulnerabilities. He's not a phenomenal athlete. He just doesn't like scramble or explode very quickly. And he is probably, for that reason, his takedown defense is not great. It's not terrible, and he has some skills on the ground, but it's not great. And Muhammad has shown a real commitment to using his wrestling to control his opponents and just to wear them out. I mean, didn't he chew up Randy Brown's knees when he fought Randy Brown with?
Yeah, he beat the shit out of Randy Brown's lead leg and then was able to get some takedowns going.
But up to the point that he can do that, because Means is going to have the reach, and he has a style that really works with that reach. He's got an excellent, very active lead hand. The combinations that flow off of it are really pretty, and though he seems open, and it does seem like he gets hit more than he should, again, he doesn't tend to get hit clean that often.
Yeah, he's also got an amazing chin.
He's insanely tough, but more and more as time goes on, like, he's pretty sneaky and crafty in little exchanges. Just little improvised moves based on feel you can see him make. Like when he knocked out John Howard.
Yeah.
With that gorgeous left hook, and then he just got his shoulder up in the way. Like, Howard was already unconscious, but his right hand was still coming because he had just thrown it. And Tim Means countered inside and popped his shoulder up and caught it on the outside of his arm as he was angling off. Like, that shows experience and craft, and to a level that I don't think Belal Muhammad has. I'm going to favor Tim Means for that reason. I think that Tim Means can probably stop Muhammad's wrestling and kicking game both by pressuring him, which is something that Means has shown a willingness to do a lot more in recent fights. I think he'll probably approach Muhammad very much the same way he approached Sabah Homasi, where he knew he had a solid striker in front of him, but he just wanted to constantly make him work, because one of Tim Means' other great advantages is his work rate and his cardio. He pushes a pace and doesn't stop pushing it. So Belal Muhammad's in this one, but I'm taking Tim Means.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be an interesting fight. I think the big thing that Muhammad has had to struggle against in the UFC, and it took me a while to kind of figure out what exactly it is that's going on with him. Like, who is this fighter now? Because I, had a pretty clear picture coming in. It's like, this is a dude who builds everything around his jab and wants to be a volume boxer that builds pace as the fight goes on and builds complexity into his game as the fight goes on. And then in the UFC, like, he got chewed up in that Joban fight, and then he had a win over Augusto Montano that was a war, and then he got knocked out by Vicente Luque. And the thing I've had to kind of come around to is that he's honestly like, I think that he's had to come around to too, is that he's too short and too short armed to be a striker that works from range behind his jab. And he's having to try and figure out a new way to be a fighter, like be a UFC fighter now without that.
I mean, personally, I would say another change that could have made that style work more would have been to, use some head movement.
Yeah.
Might be a nice improvement. Also, a thing that has me favoring Means, that not having head movement against Tim Means is a very dangerous proposition.
Yeah.
I mean, he got knocked up. Okay, like he just doesn't move his head at all.
Yeah. He doesn't move his head, and he's working to like find better ways to wind into the pocket. We saw that against Jordan Meehan more, and against Randy Brown too. But he's still getting hit a lot doing that. He's getting hit outside, and yeah, he's having trouble. Like, he can't be this established jab fighter as a dude who has, what is it, a 72-inch reach. It just doesn't work that well for him. He's not that tall. His arms aren't that long. And that what it's also meant is, against somebody like Randy Brown, who's a bad wrestler, then Muhammad has been able to do some wrestling and to like turn those fights that way, and also, take advantage of Brown's inability to check leg kicks. But in the Meehan fight, what we saw was a lot of Belal Muhammad ending up tying up in the clinch and just ending up as a clinch fighter. And what a lot of that fight ended up turning on for that is Meehan's brokenness, like ability to just crumble mentally from somebody who is tough and will get in his face and work him over a little. Like, you could see, like, Meehan was doing well. He was landing hard shots. He was fully in that fight until late in the first round, when Muhammad started finding his way into the clinch and tied him up and started landing knees and short little uppercuts and hooks. And suddenly Meehan just, like, he got cut, and he just looked like he was totally spaced out.
You can identify the exact moment that Jordan Meehan's confidence evaporated.
Yeah. And Tim Means is not that dude. Like, he was confident that he was going to beat Matt Brown in the clinch all the way through to the point that he got rocked and choked out.
Which, to be fair, up to that point, he kind of was. Like, he landed the first good shot of the fight in the clinch. I think he caught Brown with a big elbow in the clinch. Like, he's
a very good clinch fighter.
And a gutsy dude, though. That's the point.
Yeah, he's a gutsy dude. He's tough as nails. He's better. Like, he's going to have the more established range game against Muhammad. I don't think he's going to just sit there and let Muhammad kick his leg to pieces.
No, I don't think so.
And then if it gets to the clinch, like, if Muhammad can't, isn't a good enough wrestler to just plant him on his back, and I'm not sure Muhammad is, then I trust Tim Mean's clinch game more than I trust Belal Muhammad's.
What are the kinds of dynamics in your memory that have caused Tim Means to turn in his fortunately these are now more occasional than frequent, but he used to turn in a lot of sort of lackluster performances.
It used to be, if dudes wouldn't engage with him at range, he wouldn't engage them. He would just get into this sort of lackadaisical point kickboxing match. That's how he almost dropped a fight to Marcio Alejandro Jr. and had a terrible fight with Hernani Perpetuo. Like, they just ended up in these, like, ugly staring contests. Otherwise, though, you look at his career, and it's his losses mostly, going until you get back to Danny Castillo and Jorge Masvidal. And Castillo, I believe, being a dude who could just take him down and out-wrestle him. The other dudes that have beat him have been dudes that are rangier than him and he can't pick off a range offense game, and who can tie him up in the clinch and, like, be the bigger, tougher man there.
Yeah, just submit him. Like, that's a good way to approach Tim Means.
Like,
I think you're right. Like, I think maybe that Sabah Hamasi fight that I pointed to is a really indicative of why Tim Means is better now than he was a few years ago, because he does not, even against a dangerous striker like Hamasi, if it makes strategic sense to put it on the guy, he will put it on them.
Yeah, he no longer takes rounds off the way he used to,
Yeah.
or lets himself get caught up into this like point sparring match. And so you kind of have to be like a bigger, more aggressive dude than Tim Means. And that's not Belal Muhammad.
Yeah. I think we may very well be in for another gorgeous lead hand knockout from Tim Means. Like Muhammad coming in without the head movement is just a recipe for one of those nice uppercuts or hooks from Means.
Or a series of hard elbows in the clinch.
Anything. I love watching Tim Means fight. So
oh, I love watching him. He's a lot of fun. Tim Means is the favorite, opened at minus 230, adjusted up and down to somewhere in the minus 250 range, and then has climbed slowly back to minus 229. And Muhammad opening at plus 170, adjusting up to plus 201, and sliding down to plus 183. So I think that's about right. Tim Means deserves to be a reasonable favorite. Muhammad's not a bad fighter. He's got dimensions to his game. It's just not a great matchup for him in that he's still not a deep technical fighter. Without that jab building game that he used to have, he's no longer a deep technical fighter. And so a lot of the guys Muhammad's beaten up on are guys that are breakable or just inexperienced.
Yeah, but for the lackluster wrestling, Tim Means is a pretty tough matchup for him across the board.
Yep.
Just stylistically.
That brings us to our co-main event, a women's flyweight bout. Bec Rawlings versus Jessy-Rose Clark. And I kind of feel like this is a beta version of Angela Hill versus Nina Ansaroff.
Okay.
Especially in the, Rawlings is also an alliance fighter.
Yeah.
And I think has struggled similarly to Hill in trying to find that dynamic between being this high footwork, very like movement heavy volume striker and being the classic bite down on the mouthpiece and swarm people fighter that she came up as. And
I think we have seen a clear progression technically from both of them.
Yeah. Like they're both technically progressing, but they're also losing some of their identity as they progress.
Yeah.
And that loss of identity,
maybe just finding a new identity. Maybe that's the idea.
Yeah. That loss of identity, that work to find a new identity, it's been a killer. Especially a killer for Hill, who, has just really seems caught between being who seems to, well, maybe for both of them. I think for Hill especially, Rawlings has always had problems fading in fights, always. But Hill, it seems like the high energy style that she's trying to implement really just kind of wears her down as her fights go on. Jessy-Rose Clark is very one note. She is a power kickboxer. And she's not dedicated to really like squaring up and throwing down with people to her own, like to a fault, to her own benefit and to a fault. Where it's like she clearly throws good hard punches. Mm-hmm. Her technique is clean. She slips well. But she's dedicated, like, she'll land a couple clean shots and then immediately get out of the pocket and like circle away and get on her back foot and reset. At times when she doesn't even need to, where it's like, you could just bite down, stay in, and keep throwing, and you would probably get a little more out of that exchange.
Do you think it's probably because her takedown, like her wrestling isn't that good?
I think it may be because her wrestling isn't that good. It may just also be like a style she's come up with and trained with over the years.
I get the impression that she's just trying to Michael Bisping her way away from any shot attempts, just constantly on her toes for fear of getting countered with a blast.
She very much seems like a Bisping-esque fighter. Thing is that especially in divisions that are full of weird dudes or weird chicks, being a Bisping-esque fighter can work pretty well.
Yeah, in 13 years, she'll be champion.
Like,
she's just got to be patient.
Jabbing and low kicking and occasionally sitting down on a power shot here and there.
Yeah, no.
I think Jess, I think she has a much better idea of what she wants to do out there than Rawlings, in a style that she can keep up for 3 rounds. Because the other part of this is that Rawlings is almost certainly not going to wrestle Jess. Like, she's kind of like James Vick in that I can count the number of times that Rawlings has voluntarily been the wrestling aggressor on one hand. Like, she will get taken down and she'll scramble and then she'll like get locked into a clinch battle and like, maybe try to keep wrestling after that. But she's almost always the person that wants to stand and trade. And her recent alliance shift in style seems to have only increased that as like this outside, high footwork, bouncy striker.
I can see where they're going with Hill. I think that seems like a particularly weird choice for Beck Rawlings.
Yeah.
Even though she has obviously technically improved. She did in the Sohee Ham fight, though. Like, she cinched a 3rd round just by clinching her against the fence.
Yeah.
That may be a viable way to go when she gets tired against Clark.
But Jessy-Rose Clark is also not as tiny as Sohee Ham.
No, yeah.
She's smaller than Beck Rawlings, but I think
it wasn't wrestling skill. It was literally just that Sohee Ham is tiny for the division that allowed Beck Rawlings to hold her in place for so long.
And so I think especially with somebody like Rose Clark who throws with a little bit of power and works behind a jab consistently, Rawlings' durability is not great. Like, she's just, she hasn't been knocked out other than that time, or other than an early KO be a head kick and other than that Paige Van Zandt fight. But she gets hit a lot, and it seems like she gets stung a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I just get the feeling that, especially with this style she's working, that she's just going to get kind of tired and get tagged. And like this fight will start really aggressive and really competitive, and then slowly end up with her getting tagged up as the fight goes on. So I'm going to pick Jess. I think she's really limited, and I don't know that she will win a lot of fights in the strawweight division. But this one seems like this one seems very winnable for her.
It does seem like there's possibly a chance for Rawlings in that this fight was made on November 7th.
Yeah.
So we don't know exactly what kind of shape Jessy-Rose Clark was in coming into this camp. And if she's not in great shape, then her slowing down at the same rate as Beck Rawlings is going to make it a much harder fight for her to win.
Very true.
Especially because, it doesn't seem like she has any grappling game.
No.
Granted, the fights I've seen are against considerably more experienced fighters. Like I saw the Sarah Kaufman fight.
Yep.
And I wouldn't expect her, but also Sarah Kaufman, not really a grappling specialist. And it was like the moment she caught Jessy-Rose Clark's leg, she just played with her on the ground.
Yeah, she is a better grappler than she gets credit for, though. Like, Sarah Kaufman is a longtime dedicated, I can wrestle you, I will, and,
Yeah. It's just that she's not like a submission ace. She's not doesn't have a reputation for slick groundwork, all these smooth passes and position changes. And that's how she was fighting against Jessy-Rose Clark for large portions of the fight.
This is true.
Beck Rawlings is not a wrestler. Doesn't really have a sense for maintaining position. Like, the aggression could mean a submission if she goes for an attack, but it probably also means losing position on the ground. And if she does that even once, that means Jessy-Rose Clark can get back up.
Yep.
I don't know. You kind of sold me. Like, the fact that Beck Rawlings has adopted a more high energy style and already slows down dramatically. Like, that was something that was already a problem for her before the alliance move. It only kind of gotten worse. And so I don't know how a good round of improved boxing is really going to help her when she has 2 rounds of being tired against a more comfortable striker. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go Jessy-Rose Clark. Why not?
Yeah, it just, I mean, Beck Rawlings could easily, this is going to be a late notice. Beck Rawlings is aggressive, could win this. She has looked much more technical. I think she is going to start out looking more technical in this fight.
Mm-hmm.
She's also gotten in better shape, but it's just, there's a certain, like, if she's not a very good athlete, and fighters that aren't very good athletes and fight like good athletes, which is what she's doing, tend to get themselves knocked out or terribly gassed out because they are working twice as hard as a good athlete would to maintain the style that a good athlete uses.
Yeah, you could definitely level that criticism at well, the one habit we've always pointed out about Beck Rawlings is her like inability to turn down an offensive opportunity. Which I guess she has overcome that a bit with this new style because she's just at a longer range, but I think it's still there. Like she still scraps way harder than she should and scrambles way more aggressively than she should and moves around more than she should. I don't think she has a great sense for like how much energy it takes to do all of these things.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the toss up and pick Jessy-Rose Clark, who is a slight underdog. Opened at plus 115, adjusted up to plus, or well, adjusted, not really adjusted up, just rose up to plus 131, and then has dropped just in the past couple of hours down to plus 117. So she was up at plus 130, dropped to plus 117 just in the past couple of hours. Beck Rawlings opened at minus 155, was drifting down to minus 159, and then has shot up to minus 142 just in the last couple hours. So,
sorry,
I like this fight getting close to even because I think that Jess is much more able to be consistent with the style she uses than Rawlings, even if it's a less technical style.
Yeah.
Heavyweight bout, final main event, Fabricio Werdum, Marcin Tybura, and
the one we've all been waiting for.
Yeah. I do like this fight.
Me too.
I like it more than I like Hunt Tybura, frankly, and I like Mark Hunt a lot, but
yeah, me too. I mean, Mark Hunt wouldn't have thrown a boomerang at Colby Covington.
No, that's right.
Is this me or you?
This is you.
It's obviously a much like they're doing at welterweight. The UFC is scrambling for relevant fighters. Now going the route of like Nate Diaz versus Tyron Woodley, that kind of stuff is a lot more questionable. This is the tack that I don't think anyone can really complain about. They've got guys like Darren Till and Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman taking on top fighters and establishing themselves. Marcin Tybura is getting that chance here. He's still quite young by heavyweight standards. I think he's 32. And is clearly taking steps to improve. Like he is taking his shot at contendership very seriously. He has shown some nice strides in recent fights, but he's still a weird fighter. He's like technically, application has gotten better. Technique is still very bizarre. Weird swaying head movement, lots of lunging attacks, wide open swinging combinations.
He strikes like a dude who has to build momentum up to throw his limbs.
Yes. Yeah, he's like a wind-up striker, but there's craft there as well. Like he knows, I say this often, but he is one of those fighters who does all the wrong things but in all the right ways. He knows how to make his oddball technique work. It's just that certain things, like Pat pointed out in Heavy Hands, that he can't fight well going backwards. I think that's probably tied to the fact that he is so weirdly off balance anytime he tries to defend his chin. He gets his feet out of position, he leans away, his hands go away from his head. He's not in a position to respond. And so when you do get him to defend, usually he's just on the retreat. And so Fabricio Werdum comes out here and does the, like most recent prime aggressive kickboxer routine. It could really work against Tybura to back him up. Likewise, Werdum can't fight off the back foot. And also, Tybura's defense is weird but more effective than it used to be. Verdum's defense is not there. It's just like he's still not a defensively developed fighter. And so if Tybura can back Werdum up, or if they engage in an even striking contest, there are going to be a lot of openings for Tybura to work around Verdum's jab, and work his kicks, work his speed and his youth against this much larger fighter who, it's got to be said, has not looked as willing to pull the trigger since that loss to Stipe Miocic. And even that loss, in retrospect, it kind of feels like a last vain attempt to like hold on to one's prime. Like, you know what I mean? The weird, the desperation with which Werdum chased that knockout and got himself finished against Stipe Miocic has just sort of colored all of his performances since, and none more so than the Overeem rubber match where he just did nothing. Even if he had the strongest case for having won that fight, he got hit with a few counters and just stopped fighting, which is exactly the opposite of the Fabricio Werdum who won the UFC title, who was just down to throw hands and get hit and fight for his life at every opportunity. So I'm kind of feeling Marcin Tybura, and it really comes down to, for me, if Werdum can push him back, which I don't think he can do consistently. I'm not sure he has the stamina for it, especially in a 5-round fight. But also, can Werdum get Tybura to the ground? And provided that Tybura can mostly keep his back away from the fence, I don't think he can. But then the double-edged sword there, I guess, right, is that if Tybura does keep his back away from the fence and does get taken down, he's going to be in center cage on the floor with Werdum, with nothing to prop up against, nothing to help him stand up and escape. If Werdum gets Tybura down in the center of the octagon, it's bad news. Tybura is a good grappler, but it's bad news for him because Werdum in open space is just venomous on the floor. I'm going to take Tybura, though. I don't think that Werdum is going to get those early takedowns. I kind of have a feeling he's going to fade a little bit here. And I just have this little sensation in the back of my mind telling me that Werdum is past it. He's not been pulling the trigger. I don't know. I just don't have the faith.
Yeah, I have been willing to pull the I am never willing to pull the trigger at the right times on these things. Every time I'm like, this young kid, he's got it. He's got what it takes. He's gonna take this old dog to the woodshed. Then I get something like, I don't even know. It's you get Alistair Overeem like going out and wrecking somebody, or you get Werdum versus Walt Harris. Where I was like, Walt Harris has good counters, and Werdum likes to run in with his chin out. Could happen.
Or you get Arlovski Albini.
Right? Yeah, you get Arlovski Albini. There we go. That's the one.
You get Andre Arlovski looking better than he has in years against the guy who's finally supposed to put the nail in the coffin.
Every time I bet on some kid taking over, they never do. And then every time I bet on some old man coming out and like showing some kid that he's still got what it takes. Every time I bet on Damien Maia over Colby Covington, they just get taken to the woodshed, and I look like a dumbass. I am, however, going to take Fabricio Werdum here. And the big reason is that Marcin Tybura's takedown defense is not good. He's got single-level takedown defense that is all right because he can hop and like be kind of athletic about it. But most of the people that have wanted to take him down have had repeat success. And Fabricio Werdum is, pretty decent at hitting takedowns. He's not great at it, but he's, like Luis Enrique and Andre Arlovski took Marcin Tybura down.
Yeah. Well, Luis Enrique is a pretty solid takedown artist.
I know, but
no, the point stands. Yeah, and Tybura is going to be in a conundrum here, like tactically, because again, probably stop takedowns better with his back to the fence, but that means that Werdum's going to be the one coming forward.
Yeah.
But if he comes forward and Werdum does happen to hit a takedown in open space, that's less likely, but that's where Werdum is really dangerous. That's a tough one to puzzle out.
The other thing here that makes me feel like picking Werdum is that Tybura's style of striking, like he can land these good single shots, like a good overhand or a good hook or something like that. but he is so dialed into these automatic combinations. Like there was a moment in I can't remember what fight it was in. It may have been in his fight with Luis Enrique, where like Enrique was like getting up or was like backing off and was nowhere near him, and Tybura just like threw like jab, cross, hook, high kick, and it was just like, what? Like, you are just running through, like, and it's that wind-up striking thing where, like, he wanted to just throw the high kick because he was way outside, but to get to throwing a high kick, he had to throw, like, the jab, the cross, and the hook first so that he could wind his body up to get his leg that high.
How can someone be, like, a rote striker with such weird technique?
I don't know.
Yeah, but sometimes he's really just organic and on the button. Like, the way he timed and placed the head kick on Victor Pechta was, like, beautiful, expertly done.
And so like when he's striking, a lot of times he has to march himself straight forward into people and into the clinch. And Werdum is a very good clinch fighter. Like, that is one of the few places that Werdum is actually like really just a good, technically proficient fighter, is in the clinch. And it sets him up to potentially get taken down by the best parts of Werdum's takedown game, which are his trip takedowns. And so I think he's going to end up on the ground grappling with Werdum. And I think if he does that, like, Werdum's just too good a grappler for that. So I'm picking Werdum here. I'm picking that this hits the floor.
I mean, Tybura's not a scrub on the ground, though. Like, he can handle himself.
He can handle himself, but if he's not on top against Fabricio Werdum, like,
yeah, but again, that really depends on where he gets taken down, because he's certainly a more skillful grappler than Mark Hunt. And Mark Hunt, by virtue of only getting taken down by the fence, never had a single issue with Werdum. Like, Werdum is not
true.
He doesn't really strike on the ground, and he's not so instantly dangerous, I think, that anybody can't just like quickly pop back up. But maybe Tybura doesn't do that, you know?
The other thing, the thing with Tybura, though, like, I was watching that Luis Enrique fight, and he got taken down, and then his getup was to basically just give up his back.
Yeah.
And trust that Enrique wasn't athletic enough to get on it. And I don't think he can do that against Werdum.
Probably not.
So I'm going to take Werdum on this one by submission. Odds on that fight, Werdum is a pretty serious favorite. Opened at -265, dropped to -346, and has stayed there. Tybura opened at +185, rose up to +276, is now at +271. I think that's a little wide. I think Werdum is, his defensive liabilities going forward make him crackable. Obviously, the offense he showed in his fight against Harris, the instant takedown to submission, was a good reminder that he still is a very good submission threat. Mm-hmm. But the fight he had with Alistair Overeem also shows that against guys that he thinks can hurt him, he's very willing to just be this very overly cautious fighter. I do also think, though, in part, one of the things I think with Tybura a little bit is that he can let the moment get to him a little. And, like that Arlovsky fight he had where he just kind of like went crazy and then gassed out and then had to spend the rest of the fight fighting from being gassed out. And I worry that that's something that could really hurt him against Werdum. So.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Werdum is going to keep winning. But when's it going to end?
I know.
He's 39, and there's been so many recent results that are like, something's not there anymore. But then he also just kind of has a fight where he looks all right.
Yep.
I don't know. He hasn't been dazzling me with any of his recent performances.
No.
But neither has Tybura.
No.
So. Yeah, it borders on interesting at the very least.
That fight with Luis Enrique was Tybura like battling himself, like battling back and forth with Luis Enrique for 2 rounds before finding the TKO, as Enrique was totally gassed in round 3.
Luis Enrique is the dude, though. That's the top heavyweight prospect in the world right there.
Okay, on that note, we're shutting this down before we start to get way off like into the stupid woods.
Shut it down.
You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. That's where you get that's where you can find us in our writing and videos and all that good stuff that we do week to week. And over on MMANation.com, DOTCOM on YouTube. That's our YouTube channel. Give us a thumbs up. That's what I've been waiting here with my arm raised stupidly to drop down. Give us a thumbs up down there on YouTube. That helps us a ton. Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get all the latest Bloody Elbow shows, videos, news, analysis. And we will be back next week for, is that UFC Shanghai next week? Yes. Bisping versus Gastelum, UFC Shanghai. We will be back to laugh heartily at this card and then not work the event because it'll be on at 2 in the morning. So,
all right.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.